My name is Emma Carter, and if you had told me a year ago that I would be sharing this story, I wouldn't have believed you. At 19, I was just another college student, buried under assignments, constantly glued to my phone, and scrolling through social media for hours on end. Like most people my age, I thought I was invincible. Faith wasn't a priority in my life, and warnings about the dangers of technology or spiritual matters seemed like outdated concerns meant for someone else. But everything changed on a cold December night in 2022. What started as an ordinary Friday of binge-scrolling TikTok and Instagram turned into a moment that would completely shatter my reality. That night, I experienced something I can only describe as a vision. A near-death encounter where I believe Jesus himself revealed to me the hidden dangers threatening my generation. I wasn't looking for a spiritual awakening, but it found me. And now I feel an unshakable responsibility to share this message, no matter how hard it might be to believe. It was a typical Friday night, and I was in my dorm room, curled up in bed with my phone in hand. The hours slipped by as I scrolled through TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, caught in an endless loop of content that seemed meaningless, but impossible to put down. My roommates were out, and the dorm was quiet, save for the soft glow of my screen. As I kept scrolling, a strange dizziness crept over me. At first, I thought I was just tired or dehydrated, so I told myself I'd get up to grab some water. But before I could move, the room began to spin, and everything went black. The last thing I saw was my phone slipping from my hand, the screen still glowing in the darkness. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in my dorm anymore. I was floating above my body, staring down at myself lying still on the bed. I wanted to scream, to move, but I couldn't. Panic set in as I realized something had happened to me, something I couldn't explain. As I floated above my body, a blinding light filled the room. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. Warm, radiant, and alive. The light seemed to cut through the darkness, washing over me with a peace I couldn't put into words. Then, out of the light, a figure emerged. He didn't look like the paintings or church images I had seen growing up, but I knew without a doubt it was Jesus. His presence wasn't just light, it was pure love and authority. Something that filled me with both awe and comfort. I couldn't speak, but he reached out his hand and said, "Come with me. There is something you need to see." His voice was calm, yet it carried a weight that left no room for hesitation. I took his hand, and the moment I did, my dorm room faded away, replaced by a vast void filled with glowing screens floating in mid-air. The void was unlike anything I had ever seen. Surrounding us were countless screens, phones, tablets, VR headsets, and televisions, each one glowing with a sinister energy. As I looked closer, I realized they weren't just devices. They were alive with something dark and oppressive. Chains extended from the screens, binding people's wrists, necks, and hearts. Each chain bore a word etched into it: comparison, anxiety, lust, pride, envy, distraction. Jesus gestured toward the screens and said, "This is the battlefield of your generation. The enemy has made this his weapon, enslaving hearts, minds, and souls without their knowledge." His voice was filled with both sorrow and urgency. I saw faces reflected in the screens, millions of people staring blankly, their eyes devoid of life, completely unaware of the chains binding them. Jesus continued, "What began as a tool has become a trap. The enemy knows your potential, so he seeks to destroy it." As I stared at the scene, flames began to flicker at the edges of the screens, and a dark symbol appeared, burning into people's hands and foreheads. I asked, trembling, "What is that?" Jesus replied solemnly, "It is not yet the mark of the beast, but it is preparing their hearts to accept it." The scene shifted, and I found myself standing inside a church. The sanctuary was packed with people, but something felt off. Most of them weren't paying attention. Some were scrolling through their phones during worship. Others were live streaming the sermon or taking selfies. The glow of screens filled the room, competing with the light of God's presence. Jesus stood beside me, his face heavy with sadness. "This is my house," he said, "but it has become a marketplace for distractions. My people no longer seek me with their whole hearts. They seek validation and convenience." As I looked closer, I noticed chains extending even here, binding both the congregation and the pastor. The enemy's influence was everywhere, even in the very place meant to be a sanctuary from it. Jesus' voice trembled with urgency as he said, "Tell them, warn them, they must turn back to me before it's too late." I turned to Jesus, tears streaming down my face. "What can I do?" I asked. "I'm just a teenager. Who will listen to me?" His hand rested on my shoulder and his eyes met mine with an intensity that both calmed and strengthened me. "You are more than you think," he said. "You are my messenger, chosen to warn your generation and beyond. Speak boldly, and some will listen. Not everyone will believe you, but that is not your burden. Your task is to tell the truth and live by example." His words settled in my heart, filling me with both a sense of responsibility and reassurance. I didn't know how I would do it, but I knew I had to try. Jesus continued, "This isn't just about your generation. Families are divided, generations are turning against each other, and the enemy is laughing. Pray for them. Teach them. Show them what it means to put me above all else." The transition back to my dorm room was abrupt, like being pulled out of a dream, but with every detail of the vision still etched vividly in my mind. I woke up gasping for air, my body drenched in sweat. The soft glow of my phone illuminated the darkness, casting eerie shadows on the walls. My heart was racing, and I felt an overwhelming mix of relief, confusion, and urgency. The memory of Jesus' words rang clearly in my mind, yet I felt the weight of the mission he had given me. For a moment, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything. The room felt suffocating, as if the walls were closing in around me. I reached for my phone instinctively, but as soon as I touched it, I recoiled. The device felt foreign, heavy, and somehow wrong. Tears streamed down my face as I pushed it aside and sank to my knees, trembling. I cried out to God, begging him for guidance, strength, and clarity. "What do I do now?" I whispered through sobs. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I stayed on my knees, praying for my generation, my family, and the courage to carry out the mission I had been given. The days following my vision were like stepping into a new reality. Everything I had once found comfort in, endless scrolling, viral videos, the constant noise of notifications now felt like chains pulling me away from something deeper and more meaningful. I couldn't shake the feeling of urgency. Every time I saw someone glued to their phone, I thought about the glowing screens in the void, the chains binding people's hearts and minds. It was like a veil had been lifted, and I could see the spiritual battle happening all around me. At first, I kept the vision to myself, unsure of how to explain something so profound. But the burden of silence grew heavier each day. I started with my parents, hesitantly sharing what I had experienced. My mum listened with wide eyes, her hand over her mouth, while my dad sat silently, nodding occasionally. "Emma," my mum said, her voice trembling, "this wasn't just a dream. This was a message." Encouraged by their response, I began opening up to close friends. Some dismissed it, calling it a vivid nightmare, but others leaned in, asking questions and sharing their own struggles with technology and faith. I made changes in my own life too. I set limits on my screen time, deleted apps that kept me trapped in comparison and distraction, and started journaling my prayers and reflections instead of reaching for my phone. I joined a small Bible study group on campus and began to find solace in connecting with others in person, rather than through a screen. My life was no longer centered on the virtual world, but on something infinitely more real and fulfilling. As I shared my story with more people, I realized that the enemy's grip extended far beyond my generation. Parents, grandparents, and even church leaders were just as ensnared by the glow of their devices. I saw families sitting together at restaurants but not talking, each person absorbed in their own screen. I saw kids begging for attention while their parents scrolled mindlessly through social media. And I saw the deep divide between generations, the older ones blaming the younger for being addicted to technology, while the younger ones accused the older of hypocrisy and neglect. Jesus' words echoed in my heart. They must fight for their children, not against them. I felt a renewed sense of purpose, not just to warn my peers, but to bridge the gap between generations. I began encouraging parents to set aside their own distractions and prioritize their children, not just through words, but through action. Pray for them, I urged. Show them what it means to put God first by living it yourself. Teach them His word, but also listen to their struggles without judgment. To my friends and peers, I shared a different message. You don't have to let technology define your worth. You are more than your likes, your comments, or your followers. Your value comes from God, and He's calling you to something far greater. I started giving talks at church youth groups and family retreats, sharing both the warnings and the hope Jesus had shown me. The response was humbling. Parents came up to me in tears, confessing their own struggles with technology. Teenagers told me how trapped they felt, but didn't know how to break free. Slowly, I saw hearts begin to open and walls begin to crumble. It's been over a year since that life-changing night, and not a day goes by that I don't think about the vision Jesus showed me. The glowing screens, the chains, and the battlefield are as vivid now as they were then. But what stays with me most is the look in His eyes, filled with love, urgency, and hope. I know now that the mission He gave me isn't just about warning people, it's about calling them back to Him. If you're reading this, I want you to know that this isn't just about kids and their phones. It's about all of us, parents, grandparents, young people, falling into the enemy's trap of distraction and division. Technology isn't evil, but it's being used to pull us away from what matters most, our relationship with God and each other. The good news is that it's not too late to change. We can break free from the chains. We can put down our screens and pick up our Bibles. We can choose connection over convenience and faith over fear. To parents and older generations, I urge you, pray for your children and grandchildren. Show them by example what it means to seek God first. Put away your own distractions and engage with them face to face. And to my generation and those younger, I say this: don't let the enemy steal your soul through a screen. Your worth doesn't come from likes or comments. It comes from the one who created you and loves you more than you can imagine. The time is short, but there is hope. Together we can fight back against the chains. Together we can reclaim what the enemy has tried to steal. And together we can prepare for the day when Jesus returns. Not distracted or divided, but united in faith, ready to stand as His people. The choice is yours, and the time is now. Will you wake up and fight?